I'm going to tie a March Brown Nymph, and I'm starting off with a size 12 Nymph hook in the vise, and you can tie these 14, 16s, 18s if you'd like, but hopefully it shows up better on camera in a little larger size. I am going to add some weight to it, so I'll take just some wraps of lead here. Don't want to get too carried away, just a handful of wraps to give it some extra weight, and I'll trim off both ends and just push those together. And I want to situate that in the top about 2/3 or so of the hook shank. I'm going to use an 8/0 dark brown thread, and I'll just get that started in the front behind the eye, and then I'll reach back and gather all the lead and then just tie that in. And when I'm convinced it's not going anywhere, I'll bring the thread down to about the point of the hook, and I can tie in the tail. And for this, I'm just going to use a pheasant tail. I'll take maybe 4 or 5 fibers of it. I'm going to set it right on top, measure it out to be about a hook shank in length, and then I can just wrap that straight down to about the bend in the hook and bring it back up to behind the lead and trim it off. You've got a lot of different options for what type of rib you want to use. You can use an ultra wire, you can use floss. For me though, I like to use a piece of 2X tippet, and all that I've done is taken a Sharpie to it in brown, and that gives it kind of a cool effect. It's got a little bit of shine to it, it's got a little bit of translucent qualities, and it's a tough, durable material. So I'll just tie that into the side, and then I'll bring it back to about the midway point in the hook shank. This is one of those flies that I use, or I tie in a longer thorax, and so stopping the thread at that midway point gives me a good visual on where I want the thorax to start. The body for this and the thorax is going to be a red fox underbelly, but I'm going to utilize a couple of different shades of the material. And so for the body, I'm going to use the brownish reddish color, and then for the thorax I'm going to use more of the gray tones in the hide. So just taking a section of that underbelly out, try to remove the guard hairs if you can, otherwise I just cut them off if they get tied in. So I'll just create this dubbing noodle on my thread, and all I'm looking for here is just a nice even taper. Again, if you get some of those guard hairs in, I just cut them or pull them out. I'm going to use one more section just to smooth everything out here and add a little more volume. And again, I'll just trim up some of this just to give me a little cleaner look. Alright, now I can run my rib in nice even wraps just all the way to the top. And I always like to end my rib where another section of the fly starts. So I've tied it to where I'm going to have my thorax begin, and I'll just trim off the excess here. Alright, now I can tie in my wing case, and for that I'm just going to use a mottled turkey, and I'll trim a section off, and the part that's closest to the stem is real rigid, and as you get further away to the tips it gets more pliable, so it's kind of a balancing act where you want to tie it in. I want it to be soft enough to tie in, but rigid enough that it keeps its shape when I fold it back over. So I've taken a cut there, and I'll just tie this in right on top. And I'll make sure that I'm wrapping it back as far as I want it to go. And now I can add in the next bit of material, and again I'll go back to my red fox underbelly, but this time I'm going to look for that darker color. So this is more of a gray tone to it, or you could use muskrat, or if you like to use synthetic dubbing you certainly can, or even if you just wanted to keep it all in that same reddish brown color, you certainly can do that as well. So I'll tie that in, and then I'll come in and put in my legs, and I'm going to use a Hungarian partridge, but this is dyed brown so that everything is in that same color wheel. So just trimming off that bottom section, and then I'm going to pull everything back and expose that tip, and I can just come through and trim it off, and then it gives me that nice V that I can set on either side of the hook and tie that in. And when I tie, I'm bringing everything now away from the eye. So I'll mess with the legs just so that they get how I want them. Come up through and clean this again. And when the legs look about right, then I can fold my wing case over. So just bring it straight up over. Double check the legs. And then I can come underneath and just trim up what's left over. Now I can finish building out this thread head. So just making sure everything's tied down and just giving it a nice head. And then I can whip finish. Trim it off, and then finally I'll just come back through with a drop of head cement. And it's finished. So that is my March brown nymph.